Assalamu alaikum, and to all our listeners and viewers, I welcome you all to another exciting and educated edition of Health and Fitness Show. I'm your host, Fahad Matin, for today's show. I hope and pray that all of us are fit and healthy by the grace of Almighty Allah. I do pray that we all had a nice and positive week so far, and looking forward for a nice and positive week. Um, this program is broadcasting live from the studios of from Inspire FM today on 10th of September 2020, and the time just past 6 o'clock. Uh, and it's casting its positive vibes to all our lovely people in Luton and all the surrounding areas of Luton, like Dunstable, Harpenden, Bedford, and definitely reaching to all our partners and all our areas across Luton. And also, people may be listening us through our Inspire FM website, web app, or you can see us either if you want to see us, you can always log into Facebook, and you can see us via Facebook page, or you can see us if you want, you can see us via our YouTube channel as well. So yes, we are available on different platforms. As we all know, we covered a different health related topic every single week. So today's topic is very unique in a sense, because as we recently heard the Prime Minister's ultimatum yesterday, or a very good press briefing yesterday, that as from Monday onwards, we will be back again to the social, slightly smaller group lines, and there will be six people bubbles, to just make sure that we will not jump into a second peak. And definitely, we are not talking about COVID virus today in our topic, because we have talked about COVID throughout the time when it all break down. We are talking about the second best thing, which is flu vaccination program, because flu is another thing which we do go throughout every single winter, and pretty much most of the flu vaccine and most of the flu symptoms are pretty similar to COVID in a general day. So it's better to get vaccinated and get cover ourselves. So and you will love to know that I'm not the person who will be talking whole show about this topic. I have a lovely guest with me, and definitely. So without further ado, the topic for today is flu vaccination program 2021. Now, this, yes, you have heard me correctly. We are talking about the flu program for 2021, and this is part of the four program series. So this is today is one of the first program. The second program which we will do will be we will talk in that program about the school flu vaccines, and the 10 Luton flu pilot sessions, which who will be getting flu injections. So schools in 10 schools in Luton will be getting flu injections rather than the nasal flu vaccines, which have bovine gelatin. So that's on 24th of September, and then next month we will have another flu vaccines, and that will be about the flu vaccines with for long-term conditions and special groups, as well as pregnant women. And the final topic which we will be doing about flu will be in November, and that will be capturing all the remaining parties and so forth. So as I said, today is the first topic of those four series, which is flu vaccine program. And as I said, I'm not the one who will be talking about the whole show. I have a lovely guest with me, and let me introduce our guest tonight. So joining me today from Public Health England is Elizabeth Elliott, and she's the Public Health Registrar. Good evening, Elizabeth.
Hello there. Hi. Thank you for inviting me on this evening. I'm really pleased to be here.
It's really nice for you to be here. I'm really pleased and looking forward to do this show. So for the benefit of our listeners, if you do not mind, if you mind, can you give us a quick intro about yourself?
Absolutely. So, as you've said, my name's Elizabeth Elliott, and I am a registrar in public health, which means I'm working towards becoming consultant in public health medicine. And we work across a wide range of organisations, the NHS being obviously one of the most important and the one that delivers most healthcare to most people, but also local authorities. And as sure you know, public health sits in the local authorities at the moment. We work very closely with Luton, Hertfordshire, Bedfordshire, really across the whole region. Also Public Health England. So we work with those three organisations as well as our charity and other partners to deliver a wide range of services. But particularly today, I'm going to talk about flu, because we are about to deliver the largest flu vaccination programme I think this country's ever seen in really some of the most difficult circumstances. We're in a worldwide pandemic, so it's going to be really tough, but it's really important that this year we managed to deliver a really fantastically high coverage of flu vaccine across the whole of the UK. So that's what I'm here to talk about this evening.
Indeed, and I've been told that you were involved in the COVID rolling program as well, and definitely, as I in my intro I said, that it is even more important because flu vaccines, flu has a similar symptoms as COVID, isn't it?
Absolutely, and I think that's really important actually, that people are aware of some of the similarities and actually some of the differences between COVID and flu. So one of the issues when people have the same symptoms as flu is that if you haven't been vaccinated, if in the coming weeks and months you develop symptoms, and as we all know, the COVID symptoms are a fever, a cough, and loss of taste and smell. These are all symptoms that could also be indicative of the flu. So if you haven't had your flu vaccine, you're not going to necessarily know whether it could be flu or whether it could be COVID. So it's really important. If you get your vaccine, we can eliminate the fact that it would be the flu, so we can be much more sure what we're dealing with. And there's other issues that we really don't want people to be suffering from COVID and flu, because there's a possibility that you could actually, if you're not vaccinated against flu, you could suffer from the flu, and then straight after that you could be vulnerable to COVID. You could even get them both at the same time. So what we really want to do is eliminate the risk of flu as much as we possibly can now, because we have a vaccine against the flu. We don't have a vaccine against COVID. So let's do the absolute best we can to protect ourselves, our communities, and our families from flu, which can be a really, really nasty disease.
Indeed. And let's jump into our topic tonight, which is flu vaccine. Now, I know in the last few days the weather is slightly pleasant in some sense, we can say. We have slightly nice sunny spells with a moderate kind of a hot weather, well, kind of hot weather, and it says that it will be a nice weather, so on. But when we talk about flu, one of the biggest questions which always comes in our mind is that what is flu vaccine, and is it flu vaccine safe? So these kind of questions do clatter in our mind. But before going to that, I like to involve our listeners as well. So listeners, if you have any questions or queries regarding our show tonight, please send us your questions via text messages or WhatsApp on 0779 481822. I repeat, 0779 481822. Or you can send your questions or comments via our Facebook page as well. So all you have to do is just go to Inspire FM Facebook Live link, and you can view us and also send comments over there. We do like to have your thoughts in this topic as well, because flu sometimes become a very touchy subject for some people, and we will try to answer as many as we can. But over to you, Elizabeth. What is flu vaccine, and is it safe?
Okay, so the flu vaccine, it's a medication. It can be given either as an injection or as a nasal spray, as you were saying earlier. And what it does, it has medication in it that encourages your body's immune system to make antibodies that are dedicated to fighting the flu virus. Antibodies, they're proteins, they're in your blood, and they fight off the germs, such as viruses that have invaded your blood. If you're exposed to the flu virus after you've had the flu vaccine, your immune system will recognize the virus because it's built these antibodies up, and what it means is that it will fight off and it will kill the virus immediately because it recognizes it as something that's foreign to your body and you need to be protected against it. Is it safe? Yes, it's really safe. The flu vaccine has been around for many years, so we've got a really good history of a really thoroughly tested, thoroughly regulated vaccine that is incredibly safe. And we know we've been talking about COVID vaccine and how long normally a vaccine takes from kind of inception till when it actually gets delivered, and it can take up to 10 years. And the flu vaccine's been available for many years longer than that. So we can be incredibly reassured that it's completely safe for people to take.
Hmm. And definitely, it will create a very unique mix as well when things will be up and running for COVID and definite COVID vaccines and so forth. And the conspiracy theories always runs, and it is running
Hmm.
in flu vaccines as well. And since this whole program begins, but I one thing I do like to ask, and because this is one of the very confusing thing for people, and they always want to know what is flu and influenza, because we hear people from medical terminologies, or people from doctors, or some previous messages says we have to protect ourselves from influenza. What's the difference between flu and influenza?
Well, hopefully this is a really easy question to answer. That flu and influenza, they're the same thing. One's the medical term, and there are a number of different types of influenza, but it's the easiest way to explain it is flu could be any one of those types of influenza, and it's the same thing. And influenza is, or flu, whichever you want to call it, can be a really, really horrible disease. It's not a cold. It's not just a bad cold. If you've ever had the flu, you know what it is. It's not, I've been off work for a couple of days, I've had a bit of a sore throat, and now I've come back. If you've got the flu, you get a fever, headache, chills, body pain, and it can actually take from a week, but even long, can take many weeks to recover. You are flat out. So it's not something that you just get over quickly. So, and although in people who are generally healthy, they are
Hmm.
generally going to get over it in a week or two, most people. But the reason that we have this vaccine program is because there are certain groups of people who are actually more at risk. So for them, it's not just something that they can go to bed, take some paracetamol, keep themselves, hydrated, have a bed rest for a few days. It's not as simple as that. It can go on. It can develop into pneumonia, to
Hmm.
severe bronchitis. They can end up in hospital in ITU. And unfortunately, many people each year do die from flu. And I think
Wow.
people don't necessarily realize that up to 8,000 people died last year from the flu. It's not something that's really, it's not just a cold. It's not even just a bad cold. So there are certain people where they are certainly more at risk. Generally healthy people will get over it, but if you're in one of the at-risk groups, that's the
Hmm.
group that we're aiming our vaccines towards.
Wow, that's a big number. 8,000 people died last year. Wow, we don't hear that quite often, don't we?
No, and I think that's sometimes the problem with flu, that because it's quite difficult to diagnose, you're not going to people don't generally get a test for the flu, so you don't
Hmm.
know that you've had it. So you won't necessarily be able to kind of say, I've had the flu and I got over it, or I had the flu and I got really ill with it. What we do know is that we're people who are ended up in intensive care and on ventilators, who'd subsequently died and who were tested found to be positive for the flu. So absolutely, it's really high numbers, relative to the way people think about it. They think it's mild, and it really isn't mild.
Hmm. Wow. Okay. So, in the beginning, you said about the flu vaccination program has been there for quite some times. So, when did the flu vaccine, this program first started?
Oh, when did it first start? Oh, I think probably back in the 1980s. It's been going a lot. It's been around a long time, the flu vaccine. But so the vaccine's been around a long time. We know it's very safe, and this year we're actually starting to implement the vaccine really, really quite soon. In the next in fact, we've already started the planning. The planning has been going on for many weeks, but actually the delivery is starting this month and will go on for the next 4 or 5 months, getting the vaccine in place. But it's been around
Hmm.
a really long time.
Wow. Okay. So, as the program is there for quite some time, how effective is the flu vaccines itself?
Right. So the flu vaccine, it's very interesting about flu, because one of the things that I think that people have heard about, but maybe don't know the detail, is that flu changes every year. So you are
Hmm.
not going to get the flu that you maybe got last year. And if you get flu this year, some years it can actually be much more virulent. It can actually have much, wider health effects on people. Other years it can be a milder. That could depend on lots of things. But what we have to do every year with the vaccine is adjust the vaccine according to the flu virus that's circulating.
Hmm.
There's a few ways we can do that. We can look at what was going on last year and kind of get an idea of the kind of changes that the virus is going through. The other thing that we do is look at what's going on, funnily enough, in Australia, in the southern hemisphere, because they tend to get their vaccine. They're 6 months ahead of us, because they
Hmm.
have their winter before us. So we see what's going on in the southern hemisphere, and then very, very quickly they have to see what's going on and then adjust their vaccine and start building a whole new vaccine. So
Hmm.
how effective is it? We know it's the best protection that we have against a really unpredictable virus, both in children and in older people.
Mm-hmm.
Vaccine, how effective it is depends each year on how effective it has been and how successful they've been in matching it to the flu virus that's circulating. So we can't always say it's going to stop 100% of the flu viruses, because there could be some viruses that we haven't quite accounted for. So what we can't say is 100% that you'll be flu free. But what we can do is say that even if you did get the flu if you've had the vaccine, it's going to be milder, it's going to be shorter lived. So you are going to get over it quicker. Your symptoms are going to be shorter. You're going to not have your chances of having being hospitalized or having worse impacts are much, much lower. It can also reduce your risk of having a stroke. They've found some evidence of, although we're not quite sure of the mechanisms. What the other thing is, if you've had the vaccination 1 year, that doesn't necessarily protect you for following years. So it might be effective, and if you had it last year or the year before, that's not going to protect you going forward for next year or the year after. As I've explained, the virus changes. Because it changes, that means that it's not going to work because it's a different virus to the year before.
Okay, that's interesting. That is very interesting. And I must say, the whole COVID just literally pushed things in a very completely new dimensions, because COVID pretty much hit everywhere simultaneously, and it's even harder for us to do the proper studies in Australia, because they were also going through COVID as well as flu, isn't it?
Absolutely. So I think the flu season actually wasn't as bad this year in Australia, and that could be absolutely, people were at home, people weren't out and about spreading it the way they normally do. We had social distancing. It's really been actually, I don't want to say there's been benefits to COVID, because they really haven't, but there are some things that have changed people's behavior, and the fact that people are mixing much less has reduced the amount of other viruses that were circulating, and we've definitely have seen that across the board. And it's possible that if people are mixing less, washing their hands, sneezing into tissues, throwing it away, much better hand hygiene, we might even, by doing that, reduce the impact of the flu this year just by our behaviors.
I absolutely agree on that over there, but let's see. But one of the things people do want to know is that, do everybody needs or to get a flu vaccine?
Yes, and I touched on this earlier, that some people are more at risk. What we know is that there are two groups of people, particularly, who are more at risk. There's others as well, and I'll talk about them, but the two main groups are older people. So people over 65, everyone who is aged over 65 is entitled to a free vaccine on the NHS, because we know that people who are older, it's a major risk factor in having more severe flu. The other group is young people. Children, actually, funnily enough, with COVID, we know that children haven't been affected. And I think we're really thankful for that children actually have not been affected. Been very few deaths in children from COVID. But flu is very different. Children are something that we call super spreaders. They can get the disease, and sometimes they can carry asymptomatically. Sometimes they can get quite ill. And we know that actually over 25 children died last year from the flu. So that's more than the total number of children that have died from COVID.
So 25 across UK, right?
Across the UK died last year. They're under 4. Most children who die from the flu are under 4, and they may also have had other medical conditions that made them more vulnerable. But similar to COVID, the children that have died. But what you don't hear is that the number of children that have died from flu is actually higher than the total number of children that have died from COVID. So it is such an important issue, really, because when you realise the amount of time and effort and all the work we're doing to prevent COVID, actually for children, it's exactly the same. And you've touched on the work going on in Luton schools, but it's really important that all primary school children are now offered the flu vaccine, as well as children aged 2 and 3. Can get the vaccine from their GP. All children in primary schools and children in year 7 of secondary schools are all eligible for the vaccine. There are other groups as well. So women who are pregnant, and I know you touched on that earlier, that women who are pregnant are more at risk. Both them, they tend to suffer more severely from the flu if they're not vaccinated. Also their babies, because when you vaccinate the mother, you're also passing on that vaccination, that immunity to the child. And people with underlying health conditions. And there are a number of health conditions that mean that people are more likely to suffer these much worse health effects. And these are people who have liver conditions, if they immune system, if they have immune diseases, anything that could affect how they have a immune system, um, how it works. People with liver disease, kidney disease, and diabetes. All these people are more at risk, and they are eligible for the free vaccine.
Hmm. Okay, and now, as you just mentioned, that all these people who can get these vaccines for free on NHS,
Mm-hmm.
then uh, uh, who else can get the vaccine free on NHS? Is it all everyone, or is it just a handful of those people you just mentioned, or is there any additional groups as well?
So all those people I've mentioned. So we've got adults over 65, children, people with high risk. There are some other groups as well. So if you are living with someone who was on the NHS shielded list, on
Hmm.
the coronavirus shielded, if you're living with them, you can get the vaccine from your GP or from a pharmacy.
Hmm.
If you are a frontline healthcare or social care worker, so if you work in the NHS, if you work with patients, if you work in social care as well.
Hmm.
This year, also for the first time, it's going to be offered to people who are actually younger than the 65, because although
Hmm.
the risk increases significantly, there is also a risk to people aged 50 to 64. That vaccination program isn't quite starting yet. We're going to wait till we've got the vaccines all in place and we've vaccinated all the high risk people. And then later in the year, probably around November time, it should be opening up to people aged 50 to 64.
That's really interesting. So, technically speaking, the age group band has now reduced as well, but they will be opening the free vaccine for anybody who's 650 plus
That's
in
right.
November. You said, wow,
Yes, that's the
and
plan.
and they do not need to be on a long term condition or any of those at
No,
risk groups you just mentioned.
literally anybody who is aged 50 to 64, the same way that at the moment it's for people aged 65, we're opening
Hmm.
up, but with the realization that's a lot of people who have not had the vaccine before, that it's a massive and I talked about this massive logistical
Hmm.
program that we're putting in place, and it's going to be part of that to really try and reduce the impact of flu this year, because we're so worried about what's going to be happening with COVID.
Wow, that is really impactful in many different ways, and I just definitely like to get views from our listeners as well on that note. That and listeners, if you want to get involved with us, please do give us a call. Do send your questions via text messages or WhatsApp on 0777948182, or you can share your questions via Facebook link as well, live link as well. And definitely we want to hear your views in terms of flu vaccines, and I must say that is really impactful. Now, in terms of the precautions, now you just mentioned about who can get, and I think so you can what precautions before and after we have to take when we had a flu jab, or
Oh,
do we have?
you if you need to have a flu jab, you'll get sent a letter, you'll be sent an appointment to your GP, you can go to your pharmacy. There's nothing that you need to worry about before or after. There's a couple of if you are really unwell, if you've got a fever kind of the day you're supposed to have your vaccine, then it
Hmm.
might be better to talk to your health professional, and they might say, you know what, just put it off till you're feeling better. So if you're really unwell, a little bit of a cold, a little bit of a, if you've got a little bit of cough, then that's not something that you need to worry about, as long as it's a cold, as long as it's nothing more serious. Don't be sending people out with coughs. But if you've got a mild cold, you can still have the vaccine. It's not a problem. If you've got a
Hmm.
fever and you're really unwell, then absolutely, you shouldn't be going out, and you certainly shouldn't be getting the vaccine. But other than that, there's really nothing that you need to worry about, either before or after. You carry on as normal.
You just I must say you just touch a very good section, because some people, it's really hard for them to differentiate between common cough and cold and flu,
Mm.
and till last few years ago, like 10 years ago, 7 11 years ago, I used to think that anything which you have cough cold is a part of flu symptoms, or and it's a beginning of a flu, and that I think so that's one of the reason they call man flu for people like us. But then then recently it's realized man flu is real, and there are some special cases in that line. But hey ho, so what's the basic difference between those two sections? You have to be very brief because we are about to go on a break in about 30 seconds time. Or do you want me
Okay.
to ask you this question later on? How do you?
I'll answer it as quick as I can because I think it's quite simple. And I did touch on it earlier. If you've got a cold, if you've got the flu, you cannot get out of bed. You will not be able to do anything. You will have a fever. You will be really quite ill. You're not going to get over it in a day or two. It takes at least a week. So I think it's about the severity and the different kinds of symptoms.
I have to stop you over there, and I will ask you this question once we come back from the
Okay.
break. Because when we come back from the break, we will talk a bit more about flu vaccines, and we will definitely talk about certain things that what things are there in flu vaccine and how safe it is. So I
Absolutely.
will say definitely stay tuned. When we come back, we will have talk a bit more about flu vaccines. Stay tuned, and we will be right back after these short messages. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to the Health and Fitness Show. I'm your host Fahad Matin for today's show, and I'm 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 delighted that we are talking. Oh, I just literally lost my. I was about to have a sneeze. That's what happened in the live show. Anyhow, hi, Assalamu alaikum, and welcome back to the Health and Fitness Show. I'm your host Fahad Martin for today's evening, and today we are talking about the flu vaccination program 2021 with our lovely guest Elizabeth Elliott from Public Health. England, and this program is broadcasting live today on 10th of September 2020. The time just past half six, and today we are and this lovely program has been broadcast the from Inspire FM and casting its positive vibes to all our lovely people in Luton and the surrounding areas of Luton, like Dunstable, Harpenden, and Bedford. And definitely, people are listening us through our Inspire FM website, as well as Facebook, as well as YouTube channel. So if you are listening us, please do say hi to us and do post your comments and questions, because we do like to know your views as well about the topic which we are doing today, which is flu vaccination program. I know flu is a very unique topic in a sense, because different people have different views. So definitely we want to share your views. So please do get in touch with us. So before we went on break, let me introduce our guest first. So hi Elizabeth.
Hi there. Hi, Fahad.
Good. I thought because I can't hear you from anything from you, so I thought I lost you, which is good. Right. Before we went on break, we were talking about a very unique area, which is the precautions of flu jab, and definitely before and after the flu jabs and so forth. And one of the things it led to is a very common question between. Flu and cough and cold, and people do not, it's still till this day not easy to identify, and whenever they says they are unwell uh, because they're unwell because of cough and cold, they always says, oh, I had flu. And it's really hard. And if I remember in one of the past series or last years, one of the advisors did explain what is the major difference between a common cold and a flu. So can you some light on that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So immediately I was just talking about just how severe they both are. Common cold is obviously not as severe. I have heard the £10 test. I don't know if anyone's talked about the £10 note test. The £10 note test is if you have a cough or a cold and
Hmm.
someone tells you there's a £10 note outside in your garden, would you go and pick it up? If you've got a cough or a cold, you would run outside quickly, go and get that £10 note and bring it back inside. If you've got the flu, you will not be interested. You know that you are too ill to go and get that £10 note. So it's about the severity. The other thing is obviously we can prevent the flu because we've got the vaccine. And it's really important to know the difference, because when people say that they have the flu, then they think they don't need a vaccine, because they think, oh, I've just, I got over the flu. I had it for a couple of days and now I'm better. And actually, when you realize that that isn't what the flu is, then you need to realize the importance of the vaccine. And I talked earlier about just the major impacts that the flu can have and that the vaccine can protect them. If you think the flu is something mild, you're not going to think it's something that you need vaccinating. And I think one of the reasons that we're here today and the reason we want to talk to people about the flu is to realize that it's not a cold, it's not a cough, it's much more serious. So please don't don't think you've had a cough, you've had a cold, you've got over it. You know what? I don't need the flu vaccine this year. I've had the flu or the man flu, as you were saying. It's actually more serious than that.
Indeed.
Hopefully, we've got that across.
Indeed. Well, it's good that test has not tried on me, because if I am in my bed and somebody asks me and somebody says there's £100 notes in the garden, I will say, okay, I'm in my bed and I do not want to get disturbed regardless how much money is out there. So that's really good that I was not involved in that test. Anyhow, let's move on to our topic as well. And as I said earlier, listeners, if you have any questions or queries regarding our show tonight, which is flu vaccination program 2021, please get in touch with us by sending your text messages or WhatsApp on 0779 481 822, or you can send us our Facebook message as well, and we will definitely answer you those as well as best as we can. Anyhow, one of the things when we talked about is the when we talk about flu vaccines. I know we earlier says who can get, but then are there any specific people who cannot get flu vaccines, or they need to talk with their doctors first, like people who have some kind of an allergies, like for example, ag or anything else?
Right. So there are a very, very small group of people who, if they've had the flu vaccine in the past and
Hmm.
had a severe reaction to it, if you've had the flu vaccine in the past and you've had a severe reaction to it, then you should probably speak to your health professional about getting it again. And it could depend on the particular ingredient that was within that vaccine. There might
Hmm.
be a different vaccine that we can give. We've talked about the nasal spray, we've talked about the injection. If it's to do with a allergy that you have to one of the particular ingredients, we might be able to swap in a different vaccine for that.
Hmm.
But there's no other reason that anyone would not certainly 100% not be able to get the
Hmm.
vaccine. And you can always talk to a health professional, because I don't want to give clinical advice to individuals. But absolutely, if you think that you are unable to get the vaccine, talk to your GP or a health professional, and they should be able to advise you. But there's no blanket group of people.
Hmm. And one of the other common misconception is that the flu injection has porcine gelatin. So do flu vaccination injections, and I mean injections, have a porcine gelatin?
Right. The flu injection does not have porcine gelatin in it. And I think it has become a bit of a complex issue, because there are different vaccines that do have porcine gelatin. But the injection, which is what is available for anyone who is an adult, so anyone over 18 is eligible for the injection, and children who are aged between 6 months and 2 years, they will get the injection. So for those groups, you do not need to be worried at all. And I know obviously a number of people may have concerns about porcine gelatin and the fact that it's where it's derived from, and may not be comfortable with that. But from a injection perspective, there is no porcine gelatin in the
Hmm.
injection.
Indeed. Now, when we talk about flu vaccines, so there are two kind of vaccines, right?
Mhm.
So there's one is injections, and then one is nasal spray. Is there
That's
any
right.
other kind as well, or is it just these two?
There are different kinds of injection. There's more than one kind of injection, but it will be divided into injection and nasal spray. And the nasal spray is the one that's aimed at young people and children, and the injection is for very young children under 2 and older people.
Okay. So when we say nasal spray
Yeah.
vaccine, what age group they are specific for?
Right. So it's called Fluens, and it's the nasal spray, and for children aged 4, so in primary school, up until year 7. So this year, anyone in primary school and children in year 7 are able to get the vaccine through the nasal spray, and that's the way it's being disseminated, being sent out across the country. And there is a really good reason for that. The nasal flu vaccine has been shown to have the best protection for children. So
Hmm.
we are aware that obviously people are not happy about the fact that it does contain porcine gelatin, but as a first line, if possible, if people are happy to have that nasal vaccine, that's the best one for children. But we do
Hmm.
recognize that some people are unhappy about that, and that we are putting in, and I know you're talking about that in a couple of weeks, what's going to be going on in schools.
Indeed, and Luton was the very first pilot site
Yes.
in whole UK in the last 3 years, and there's a special study sites going on last year and the year before last as well in Luton to see the outcome of school kids, and definitely we will talk about those things
Mhm.
on our show on 24th of September about those 10 schools and school children's vaccination program, and I definitely urge all the listeners as well to listen us on that day as well, because it may affect you in any way, shape, or form as well. So, in terms of let's come back to the nasal spray itself.
Mhm.
Now, there are some adults, and I know a few in within my family as well. When you talk about injections, they literally get petrified, and they do not want any injections. So any adults who's like not very happy with injections, you know what I'm going. I
I
can see from
do.
your
I
face.
know your question. I do know your question. You
You
want to know, can adults have the nasal spray?
Yes, indeed. See, that's called same mind, same wavelength,
I
same
see where
wavelength.
you're going. I can see where you're going. Right. So, well, this is quite a difficult one because as much as the nasal vaccine is best for children, the injectable vaccine is actually the better one for adults. And actually, the nasal spray is it's not only not recommended, it's not licensed for adults.
Hmm.
The only group of adults who are able to have the nasal vaccine are actually adults who've got a learning disability and are really unable to have that injection. But I can reassure you, said it was someone in your family. It's a very straightforward, the injection. I'm sure you know as well. It's quick. It's relatively painless, and it's so much, if you get comparing it to getting the flu, it's so much, less of a problem when you think that you could be not just protecting yourself, you're protecting your family, your community. So what we would suggest is that I know people are, might not like the idea of an injection, but actually it's the best vaccine, and you want to do absolute best for yourself and your family and protect as many people as possible. So yeah, unfortunately, it's not the flu spray is not available for most adults. So they're just going to have to power on through and have that injection and
Indeed,
just
and
think they're doing
I,
better for their families.
I absolutely understand that, and to be honest, myself, I don't mind. I'm a regular blood donor, so I don't mind putting a needle in my arm and lying on the chair to donate my blood. Injections like these are not a very biggie one, and Alhamdulillah, I never had any problems with injections throughout my life. But yeah, there are people that still there. So I thought, let
Yeah.
me ask that. And as you mentioned that there are different kind of vaccines. So injections as well. So there are there different kind of injections as well, or
They
the
have
same?
they have very slightly different ingredients, and it could be to do with the supply from various. Obviously, vaccines come from different they're produced from different manufacturers, so they may
Mhm.
have very slightly, and there are two very slightly different types of vaccine. But
Which are
I don't want to go. It's quite complicated and it's quite
it's
detailed. But I think
sorry.
for people who are getting that vaccine, it makes absolutely no difference. To the person getting
Hmm.
the vaccine, they are the same. So the injection is whatever is the best one for them on the day.
But then all those vaccines have the similar content, same coverage, same everything.
Exactly.
So
They
it's
are
like
all very similar.
different companies making same vaccines in a different way. But yeah, it's
They are made very slightly differently, but it doesn't make any difference. They're not live vaccines. They are inactivated, so that you don't have to worry about any kind of ill effects or anything like that. They are
Mhm,
they're all perfectly safe, and they're going to be the best that's right for you on the day.
mhm. Indeed, definitely, definitely, it is. It's always need to be better for us. Now, when we talk about vaccines and people who are at risk and the work things work, one of the people who are not allowed to have any medications whatsoever are the pregnant women. Now, they are not even allowed to have anything else but paracetamol, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not a woman, so I have no idea. I have a wife and I have sisters who have gone through those things, so I know that even they are even in a severe illness, they just doctors GP just says go and have paracetamol rather than a proper medication. So is flu vaccine safe for pregnant women?
That's a really good question, because pregnant women, absolutely, you want to do the absolute best for you and your baby when you're pregnant. And, so many medications have not been tested on pregnant women. So you are really kind of, told not to take anything. However, it's different with the flu vaccine. The flu vaccine is incredibly safe for
Hmm.
pregnant women, and pregnant women are at an increased risk of complications when they're pregnant with the flu. So it's really important. As I said earlier, pregnant women are one of the groups who are encouraged and who are eligible for the free vaccine. There are a number of benefits to pregnant women also, because it stops them getting the flu. But what it can also do, having the flu, as well as having all those respiratory impacts, it can also impact your pregnancy. So it can increase your risk of miscarriage. It can
Hmm.
increase your risk of having your baby born prematurely or low birth weight.
Wow.
So they are really, really major things that you really want to avoid. And thirdly, it will protect your baby as well, because your
Hmm.
baby is not able to have the flu vaccine until they're 6 months old.
Hmm.
So if your baby is born around the time of flu season, they cannot have the vaccine. If your baby is born prematurely or needs any kind of special care, they cannot get the flu vaccine, and they're going to be more at risk. If you have the
Mhm.
flu vaccine, those antibodies, and as you know, when you're pregnant, that many antibodies can go from you to your baby. So
Mhm.
you can get your pregnancy, your flu vaccine at any time in your pregnancy. You can get it your first trimester. You can get it up until the date your baby is due. You can get
Mhm.
that vaccine. So it's really important. Speak to your midwife, speak to your GP. They should be offering it to you. As
Mhm.
part of your routine antenatal care. It should be being offered as long with the whooping cough vaccine, which is also offered. You can even have them at the same time. So you really shouldn't worry about that as a vaccine. And I know, as we said earlier, you want to be really careful, but the benefits of this vaccine absolutely outweigh any risks because it's been really thoroughly tested. So yeah, I just really want to encourage anyone who's not sure, who's thinking about having that vaccine this time of year, this year especially, really, really important. Go and get your vaccine, speak to your midwife and speak to your GP.
Mhm. So, are vaccines available now for them to get linked, or is there lag time?
So the vaccine is coming in now. So it will depend on whether your GP has got their vaccines in already. I know they're being ordered and they are coming in, and vaccines that GPs and midwives are prioritizing who needs to get it. So you can contact them and they will be able to tell you when you can come in, or you can wait. If you've got a couple of weeks, they will contact you. They will send you an email or a text, contact you and
Mhm.
tell you to come in and book your appointments. So yeah, absolutely, from now up until when your baby's due, and they'll be definitely doing vaccinations throughout the winter.
Wow. Okay. So, and when we talk about pregnant women, we also want to talk about, and I did touch base on this previously in the first half as well, is the allergy part. And then when we talk about allergy, we also talk about people who sometimes do not feel well after getting a flu
Mm,
vaccines, and then there are myths that the flu vaccines give them flu and
mm,
yada yada yada. And that's one of the reason I ask, what's the difference between cold and flu? And that is very awkward, because sometimes, and it's not all the people, and it's not all the time. Sometimes some people have not feeling well after having flu vaccines. They have slightly fever, bit of cough, bit of cold, bit of achy body kind of thingy. So why some people not feel well after getting a flu vaccine while others don't?
Thank you. Thanks for that. So, first of all, what I want to say is if you feel unwell after you have had the vaccine, this is not caused by the flu. You do not have the flu. The only way that you would have the flu after a flu vaccine, if you already were incubating the flu before you had the vaccine and the vaccine just hasn't had time to work yet. When you get that feeling, so it's a bit of a temperature, you might feel a bit under the weather, aching muscles, you also might get a sore arm. I know whenever I've had the flu vaccine, I do for a couple of days, I get a bit of a sore arm. That is basically your body producing an immune response
Mhm.
to the injection, because what we want to do is your body to think that it's being attacked by the flu virus, and that's why it mounts that response. And what you're feeling is that your body's immune response. So
Mhm.
you can take some paracetamol. If you're not pregnant, you can take some ibuprofen, just to allay those symptoms. They'll last a couple of days. They are not going to give you the flu.
Mhm.
They're not causing the flu. The other possibility is you've got another virus, because as we know, there's flu, there's COVID, but there's lots of other viruses,
Mhm.
rhinoviruses, adenoviruses, paraflu. There's lots of other viruses that can circulate. So you could have one of them as well. Flu vaccine only protects you against the flu. It's not going to protect you against some of these other viruses. They're much milder. They don't cause the same impacts as flu can, but you
Mhm.
could still have one of them. So if you've had the flu vaccine in the past and then you felt under the weather and you've decided, you know what, it's not worth it, the chances were you already had something else. The effects that you get, and not everyone gets them, as you said, some people get them
Mhm.
worse than others. You're going to feel a bit under the weather. Take some paracetamol, take it easy for a day or two, and you'll be back to normal within a couple of days.
Wow. Okay, that's nice. But I'm surprised that there are other vaccine, there are other disease which is similar to flu, but not flu. It
Well, they're
is.
more like they're the coughs and colds. They're those coughs and colds
Mhm.
that they circulate all winter. And I'm sure you've heard rhinoviruses. There's something called paraflu, which kind of looks like flu, but it's not quite flu. There's a lot of stuff about. We don't have vaccines for them, but generally they're not caused, but they don't cause the same impacts of flu. And I think that's why they probably don't have the same kind of high profile, because you get over them, you feel a bit run down for a day or two, you take a day off work, you go to bed, within a couple of days you're back, you're back at work and you're feeling fine. And that's what, if you have that at the same time that you get your flu vaccine, it can cause a bit of confusion. But what we want to kind of make sure people are aware of is they're not going to get the flu from the flu vaccine. They may feel a bit under the weather, but you can take some paracetamol to get some rest, and actually you'll be fine. And then you'll be protected because your body has mounted this immune response. You've got those antibodies, so you're hopefully protected, and you're protecting yourself, your family, and the wider community.
Indeed, I hope so too as well. Now, one of the things, and I'm going back to the very awkward, uncharted territories of COVID, and again, this is a very common question soon, and there are still people's mind that does flu vaccines protect me from getting COVID, or will flu vaccines put me in at risk of getting COVID? So, what do you say on that, on both fronts?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think these are really important, especially this year, because we haven't gone through this before. So what's really clear, and I think we've been talking about this all evening, is that flu and COVID are completely different viruses. They may have some similarities, and I talked earlier, you can be a little bit confused at the beginning because they can cause fevers, they can cause coughs, but they're different. The flu vaccine doesn't protect you against COVID. But there is something really important that it will do. If you are protected against the flu, that means that you are not likely to get caught up in all the complications that could come along with flu. And this winter, we have no idea what's going to happen with COVID. And there could be a pull on the NHS. If you are protected from flu, that means you are making sure that the NHS is not going to be overrun with a massive flu epidemic at the same time that we're dealing with a COVID epidemic. So
yeah,
what you're doing,
they're already talking about it. The number of people who are infected are getting up and up, and that's one of the reasons that new social bubble rules are back in force again from Monday.
So we want to, we hear it all the time. We want to protect the NHS. So if you want the most, one of the basic things that you can do, if you get your flu vaccine, that means that if anyone, we can't stop COVID, but we can make sure the NHS is protected from people who would otherwise be in, with complications. The other thing is that because they present with similar symptoms, it can be difficult sometimes to tell them apart. So we talked about earlier, if you have the flu vaccine and you're vaccinated from flu, then we know you don't have COVID. We know that you're not going to have the flu, so it's more likely that it's COVID. So it can take time. It can take some time. We don't have to worry that it could be flu. Could it be this? Could it be that? Thirdly, and can I do one more reason?
Yes, please, because we are just running out of time. We just have 1 minute to end the show.
Okay, well, and I think I said it earlier. You don't want to get them both at the same time. If you're vaccinated from flu, you're not going to get them both at the same time, which could be really devastating.
Indeed. As I said, we are just literally running out of time. We just have a couple of minutes left before the end of the show. So if I asked you to do a quick positive message for our people, for our listeners, before we end of the show, it will be brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we've talked a lot about the flu vaccine and how important it is, and we know that the flu vaccine really is the best defense that we have against a really serious and a really deadly illness. I think we've talked today that flu is not just something mild, it's something really serious. So the vaccine is really important. This winter, more people than ever before are going to be offered the free flu vaccine. So I'm really urging anyone who is in any of those eligible groups, take up your offer. When you get contacted, make sure you get your vaccine. And by doing that, you're not just helping yourself, you're helping your family and the whole community and the NHS. So that's really my message to everyone and listeners today.
Indeed, and that's a positive message in many different ways. And as Elizabeth just said, if you have received any letter or messages from your GPs to get flu vaccinations, please do get flu vaccinations. And if you are not in the bracket, and if you still want to get flu vaccinations, can they get it?
If you're not in the bracket, then you can go to a pharmacy. Many pharmacies are offering it. You may have to pay for it. If you're not in those eligible groups, it costs about £20. So if you're not in any of those eligible groups, you can still get it. But as I say, not through the NHS. But as I say, it's not that expensive and it's worth protecting yourself.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for joining us today and giving us such a good insight. And as I said, this is one of the four shows we are doing this year for on the topic of flu, covering different areas of flu. But anyhow, thank you so much for coming to the show tonight
Yep,
and
thank you for inviting
sharing
me.
your insight. And that's all for our show tonight, guys. Thank you very much for joining us today. If you have missed any part of the show, you can always go back and listen back option on Inspire FM webpage, as well as you have Facebook and YouTube channels to go and view us or listen us. If you still have any questions, please do pop it into our chat on online on Facebook, and we will try to come back to you as soon as we can. Next week we will be talking about children's education psychology with and that will be brother uh, Suleiman will be talking about it. Until next week, I'm your host Fahad Matin saying Assalamu alaikum.